Words like meteor, over-deliver, dress to impress. That's what I've come to associate with the Yamaha R-N2000A Hi-Fi network receiver. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasalo with Audioholics. I know I've covered this product a lot. I did an exhaustive bench test report as well as a YouTube video. I've done live streams on the R-N2000A. I spent a lot of time with this bad boy, and I want to wrap up this series with my overall review, my experience, my listening results, my usability, all of that stuff. The fact that you could plug it into a computer and have a high-end USB DAC built into this and stream all your music to it. There's just so much to like about this product. And I want to give you some breakdown features of it. You should look at our review, the formal review. It's linked in the video description below. I spent a lot of effort into this, but I enjoyed it because two-channel products are really some of my favorite to review. So anytime I get a flagship from a company like Yamaha, like this guy, I'm all for it. And I want to just give you some basics here. So this is the model that's based on the AS1200. It has the same analog section, the same power supply, the same amplifier, the MOSFET amplifier section, the same balanced construction, symmetric design. But this adds in HDMI ARC, it adds in a USB DAC, it adds in MusicCast management system and bass management and reflective sound control portion of YPAO. So there's a lot of features packed into this receiver, and it has an AM/FM tuner, which I doubt anybody will use. So you look at this thing. This is a bad boy receiver. It weighs almost 50 pounds. It's only rated at 90 watts a channel, but when you flip the lid off of it, you see a 600 VA transformer, 4 times 18,000 microfarads of capacitance. This has such a tight, stiff power supply, bigger than what you would get in most flagship receivers. And if you compare it to the R-N1000A, the one I also did a bench test on, that has actually 10 watts more per channel rated at 8 ohms, it doesn't have the power supply of this. It's got a great power supply. It's got an E-core, about 500 VA and 2 times 12,000 microfarad capacitors. So it's got a meaty supply. But this takes it to the next level. And why is that important? The reason why that's important is if you want to drive a wide variety of speakers, whether they're 8 ohm or 4 ohm, whether they're high sensitivity or low sensitivity, you need an amplifier that has a really stiff power supply that could almost double down with having load impedance. You want this to act as close as it can to an ideal voltage source. And that's exactly what this thing did. And I talked about this in my bench test results. When I measured this amplifier, not only did it over-deliver its 90 watts a channel, but I literally preconditioned this amplifier for an hour at 1/3 power, which is the old FTC standard. You're supposed to do it at 1/8 power. After an hour, it was just warm. Wasn't hot, wasn't complaining about anything. It just wasn't stressed. And when I went and I did my bench test, it actually got better results with this preconditioned warmed up than I did when it was cold. And the advantage of a design like this, it's a linear amplifier, but because it's got so much power supply capacitance, such a big transformer, it doesn't sag whether one channel is driven or 2 channels driven, and it behaves so well for long sustained test tones. In fact, I did the new 5-minute sweep that the FTC wants you to do to be in compliance with it. I wouldn't do that on most AVRs. Most AVRs that are 150 watts a channel, you do that, it's going to shut down. It's going to overheat. Those fans are going to turn on when it's running for more than a few hundred milliseconds. This boy didn't complain at all. In fact, it over-delivered. I got 100 watts a channel with both channels driven at 8 ohms at less than 0.1%, about 165 watts or so at 4 ohms, and about 250 plus watts at 2 ohms, both channels driven. I never test receivers at 2 ohms. This had no problems with that. And the power, whether one channel was driven or 2, was virtually the same. And it made me at first believe that this thing had a regulated power supply, which you don't really want to do in a linear amplifier design with a linear power supply because you lose power, you lose efficiency through the regulation. They did a different form of regulation. They gave you so much power supply capacitance that the rail voltages don't sag. And what does that translate to music? It means when you're hitting these hard, sustained bass notes, the power is not going to get compressed. Your speakers are not going to be starved for power. And that's exactly what I experienced when I fired this thing up. And I initially started with my Revel F328BE tower speakers. Those are 4-ohm speakers, but they're high sensitivity. They're in the 91 plus dB range. It sounded fine. It sounded great. It sounded full range. It sounded large. In fact, when I switched between this amplifier and the Cambridge Audio Evo 150, sounded pretty similar. This maybe had a little bit more of a laid back, more behaved characteristic, maybe a little bit better separation in the sound than the Cambridge Audio, which is a little cheaper than this. But when I switched to different speakers, when I switched to the R-N1000A 1528 bookshelf 8 speakers, things really started to show their differences between having a really nice power supply in an amplifier like this versus having an amplifier that just doesn't like to drive continuous low impedance loads, like the Hypex module that was in the Cambridge Audio. So with the 1528s, that's a 84.5 dB sensitive speaker. It's a bookshelf, but it's tuned lower than the Revels. It's tuned down to 22 Hertz. So those speakers in my guest room actually have deeper bass extension than the big Revels, and they play hella loud. And when I was playing those speakers on other amplifiers, they did not have the control, the tightness and authority in the bass, and just the clarity that I was hearing with this. And I compared this receiver with the R-N1000A. I compared it with the Cambridge like I was telling you. And although I love the 1000A, this thing just had a much lower noise floor when I was streaming Tidal Connect. It just sounded, it's almost like comparing black levels on a OLED versus an LCD TV. It just was darker. There was more dynamic range or meat to the music because the noise floor was so low on this. And the details I was hearing in the music was just incredible. I mean, I don't normally gush over amplifiers, but I'm telling you guys, this does not sound like a 90 watt amp. This reminds me of the Denon PMA 110 that I reviewed a bunch of years back, 3 or 4 years ago, the integrated amp, which I still have. And it's rated about roughly the same power as this. And it's built on the same kind of philosophy of having a really big power supply, lots of output devices. And that's a very meaty sounding amp as well. So this takes that to the next level because you have MusicCast functionality, you have HDMI, you have bass management. You don't have all that stuff with the Denon. That's just an integrated amp with a really good DAC. So for roughly the same price, you're getting all that with the Yamaha. These are both great products, and I really enjoy the craftsmanship of this Yamaha. I love the signal meters, the VU meters. I love the mechanical bearings and the volume control. You don't get that often. You look at some of the AV receivers, this is not smooth and gradient like this. This is just a touch of class, the buttons on it, everything. This reminds me of 1980s Yamaha, when they were a hi-fi company and they were just getting into home theater. They were really still focused on hi-fi. This is the feeling when I get this receiver and I pick it up and I am experiencing its wonderful sound. It gives me kind of a throwback to the 80s. Of a simpler time with music. And the beautiful thing about this, when I did all my bench test results, is the DAC, the ESS 9026 Pro, I believe, very high-end DAC from ESS, the Sabre DACs. The DAC measures great, the analog measures great. The phono section is among the best phono sections I've ever reviewed in any product, regardless of price. So if you are thinking about getting a turntable, you want to pair it with this amplifier. This amplifier will do your vinyl collection justice. And in fact, I love that you can connect your USB DAC to this. That's a huge feature. If you're doing a desktop audio or you're doing a NAS or you just want to plug in a USB drive, you can access that music. The MusicCast app is pretty darn good. They've really improved it over the time. I've enjoyed spending time using Qobuz, using Tidal. I prefer using Tidal Connect. The interface to me is just quicker. I just prefer that when I'm doing that, which you can do on this. You have Bluetooth and you have some AirPlay support as well. So the overall experience of this receiver has just been a good time for me. When I was listening to music on Tidal, I was comparing the 1000 to the 2000 on songs like James Blake, Limit to Your Love. That is a song that you should never use for wimpy speakers or wimpy amplifiers. The bass in that song is exactly what I was telling you about. The sustained bass will really separate the men from the boys in speakers as well as amplifiers. So with the 1000A, that song sounded great driving the 1528s. But when I stuck this in place of it, the bass seemed tighter to me. Now it's funny because you would think you would have more bass with an amplifier like this, but in fact, maybe there was a little less bass over the 1000 because the 1000 was a little looser, or the damping of it wasn't as good as it is with this. This just sounded so much clearer in the bass, the delineation of the bass on that song on the 2000 over the 1000. And then when I threw on Rebecca Pigeon and SACD, The Raven, I listened to the song Spanish Harlem. It's been a while since I've listened to that song. With the low-level details that you can hear out of this receiver because the noise floor is so low, you can hear stuff going on in the recording. They were moving stuff around, microphones, something in the studio, something that wasn't really intended to be in the recording at the beginning of the track. You could clearly hear it with this receiver. And just the vibrancy of her voice was excellent. The bass, again, it was just very in your chest, nice and tight. Now, when I tried to use YPAO, it was kind of a mixed bag for me, to be honest with you. Two reasons why YPAO didn't deliver in this instance is this system was set up in my guest room where the speakers are a few feet off the front wall. So I've got some speaker boundary interference issues as a result. You can see that in my measurements. There's some dips in the bass. And my seating position is pretty close to the back wall because there's a daybed in there. So I have to move myself a couple of feet forward, otherwise the bass just gets too intense. YPAO did its best. It flattened those big peaks, as you could see in the graphs. But the problem with the way the YPAO was set up, at least on this system, is it was targeting a flat response. And a flat response gives you lean bass. Not the best kind of experience that you would want. When I used YPAO engaged with this system, all of that bass impact was pretty much eliminated for songs like the James Blake one I was telling you about. Songs like Differently from Marion Hill was just not as impactful. Now the funny thing about the YPAO is it phase aligned the speakers better, so I was getting better coupling below tuning. I actually got more bass below tuning. What I really wish Yamaha would have done was give the option for a manual PEQ. So let me turn off the EQ, which you can do. You could turn off the EQ from YPAO and still benefit from the level matching and the distant delay calculations that it does, because it's balls on accurate for that. It did my delays and my levels perfectly. So you could turn that off, which I did for the rest of my listening, but you can't do manual PEQ. And come on, Yamaha, we really need that. If I had a 3-band PEQ, I could have fixed most of my acoustical problems in the bass region very easily from my listening position, and I would have the best possible experience. There are products in this category that offer more flexibility with EQ. You know, you've got products from NAD, for example, that have Dirac built in. You've got other products from other brands that have some type of room correction stuff built in. Yamaha could take this to the next level and add some manual PEQ function. That would be my recommendation. I also am not thrilled with the fact that you have to run YPAO to even access the bass management or to even access the delays and distances. They should allow you to do those adjustments without running YPAO. Now keep in mind the YPAO is a one mic position calibration. It's not like the multi-point that you get with their AVRs. And it doesn't truncate any sampling rates. It's all the way good out to 192 kilohertz. So if you have a better acoustical environment in your room than I did, you might find the YPAO in this thing beneficial in your listening. It's really up to you guys. I'd like to hear some comments down below on your experience with that. But I say use it, try it. If you don't like it, turn it off. The Pure Direct feature on this thing really gets it to the next level in performance, as you could see in my bench test results. It just, everything that you throw at this unit, everything that you throw at this receiver sounds wonderful, and that's been my experience. So yeah, guys, the last thing I want to talk about is just the back panel. Just the connectors on the speaker terminals are incredibly just beautiful. It's just like they have on the 2000 series speakers, which we reviewed. All of the gold-plated RCA plugs on here are just nicely bolted to the unit. I can't say enough about its construction. I couldn't even get the top off. I didn't want to mess with it. I took the screws off and it seemed like it was pretty sealed. But if you look at the internal pictures of this thing, it's crafted like a fine watch. The only weirdness I found with this unit was when I plugged in my Emotiva common mode line conditioner, it was creating some internal noise in here. Don't understand why it was doing that necessarily, but I took that out of the system and it was fine. I did compare the DAC on this unit versus my Denon A110 SACD player, which uses the really high-end Burr Brown DACs, one of the best DACs ever made in audio. And initially, I actually thought the Denon sounded better. I had my daughter come in and listen, and we did listening tests, and everything sounded snappier, more lively. It didn't sound louder to our ears. It just sounded more clear in the higher frequencies. I was like, this can't be. How could Yamaha get mogged by Denon when it's at this level of performance? So I took my SPL meter and I ran some internal test tones using a disc on the player, and I compared the analog versus digital with this unit, and the Denon was 1 dB louder. 1 dB. So I went back every time I switched between analog and digital, comparing the Denon DAC versus the DAC in the Yamaha. Those sonic differences that I heard prior went away. And I brought my daughter back in. She didn't know what I was doing, and I was switching back and forth. She didn't really hear much of a difference. Sometimes we thought we preferred the sound of the Denon. Sometimes we thought we preferred the sound of the Yamaha. We were splitting hairs. But it just goes to show you how control tests need to be done before you make assumptions, false assumptions about the product, whether it's good or not. But overall, this has just been a great product. I'm sad to see it go. And I do recommend, if you guys are on the market for a 2-channel network receiver, and you really want to do your vinyl collection justice, your digital sources justice, you want to have your laptop so you can plug in and get your music from there, or a NAS drive, and you want to take advantage of an app that's easy to work with for music management, and you want to have better sound from your TV. Imagine that. Imagine people that don't want to have the complexity of home theater system, or they're thinking about buying a high-end soundbar. Don't do that. Get something like this if you're a music lover and you want to also enjoy TV. You could still get an excellent experience watching a show or even watching a movie with just a really good amplifier and really good speakers. So guys, that's a wrap. If you like this video, please hit the thumb up, hit subscribe. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. If you are considering buying this unit, please use our affiliate links. We appreciate the support on the channel as well. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.